Anger management. That's what we're talking about today. Hi, I'm Kirby. I'm a specialist in trauma and attachment theory. I shoot these videos every day to help people figure stuff out and navigate through the difficult times. And anger is a very difficult time. So today we're talking about anger management, or what is anger? How does it work? How can we get free of it? Or change it, reshape it, mold it? How can we move things in a direction that we would prefer to move them, and away from a situation where we don't want to have it be, right? I don't want to be here, breaking stuff and being extremely dysregulated. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit of a story first. When I was in my late teens, and then of course it moved into my early 20s, one of the defining traits of my behavioral makeup, my life maybe even, was extreme bouts of anger. Easily triggered, and it would consume me very quickly. And I knew that lashing out was not okay. Thank God someone got that in my brain early on. So I knew that lashing out was not okay. And so luckily it was never directed at people or any living creature, but stuff, things like chairs, windows, laundry hampers. There was a particular moment with a laundry hamper that was surprising. Yeah, those were fair game. And the thing is that it wasn't just a single moment. It wasn't like, oh, I just had this conversation with this person and now I'm angry about something. I mean, that also happened. But there was also these moments, several of them, where it would just be like, I am absolutely furious, raging mad at just like life in general. Like the unfairness of it, the fact that I'm stuck here, the way that this interaction is playing out, the inability to find a job I like, inability to find a partner I like, being stuck in this, renting a room in this house with these other people, and I would much rather just be on my own or be with different people or whatever, right? I played a lot of video games at that time, and I grew up with the Atari 2600, and then it kind of like grew through various Sega Genesis, and then eventually into PC games, and then high-end PC games. And yeah, there would be moments where it was just stark raving mad because something didn't go the way that I wanted it to. And luckily, I'm looking at these thousands of dollars that I had spent on this fancy computer sitting in front of me, and I can't really lash out at this. So then you've got the inner war where it's just like there's this part of you that's just like, I just want to punch the screen or break the keyboard in half or whatever. But yet this other part being like, no, because if I do that, I won't be able to play the game tomorrow, which is kind of silly, right? Because we think about that, and it's just like literally the source of the thing that is creating all this rage, theoretically, is the thing that I'm trying to protect to make sure that I can go interact with it again tomorrow. Okay, so that's my background in my various trips with anger. If we trace that backwards, guess what? We find a father that was raging out as much as not. That was probably his primary strategy at dealing with any kind of emotional situation that he did not like or created discomfort, is that he would create anger and vitriol and hatred and judgment and everything else, right? So look, my little brain learns that anger is not only an appropriate response, but the most appropriate response, because let's switch over to the mother side, right? Because people always have this story that it's just like the mother is this quiet, nurturing, whatever, right? While she was in the nurturing space, she was also very prone to raging out anytime she crossed some threshold of overwhelm. And then it would escalate to just wailing physical strikes and wooden spoons, and there was this constant threat of the wire-handled fly swatter, and it's literally this, the little thing that you smack flies with on the wall. And we had one that had this long wire handle that would fly through the air very quickly, and when it hit, it stung like crazy. And so not only was that an ever-present threat, but it was an ever-present spoken threat, in the sense that me and my brothers had all experienced these things, and then that threat was present. And so if we were in a situation where mother was not happy about whatever was going on, and her nervous system was dysregulating hard, she would bring out the threat that it's just like, if this keeps up, then when we get home, you're going to get the wire-handled fly swatter. And then to bring this into classic textbook attachment connection or stories, you have the moment where the parent is, this in this case specifically the mother, is wailing, lashing out with physical attacks, and then crying about it, and because of the guilt she feels inside, and she's like, I'm only doing this because I love you. And so that, in attachment space, attachment research, attachment theory, that creates a classic case of like massive confusion inside the child that say, this is what love is? Like, what are you talking about? Right? No, honestly, the child brain doesn't even get a chance to say, what are you talking about? Because that thought hasn't even entered the mind yet. It's simply, this is what love is. This is what being alive is. This is what being dependent upon this big, powerful parent figure is that they are unstable and volatile and prone to physical assault, attacks, anytime they're not stable or not at peace. And so if I want to survive, I need to start monitoring their emotional state and then managing their emotional state. And then that creates very strong motivations inside me to control data, control what they're exposed to, which means manipulation and lying, and also to basically run for the hills anytime something's happening where their emotional system is moving up towards dysregulation. So that's a classic, literally textbook case of creating a disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment style in the children, because it's the like I have a instinctive craving to establish connection with you, but yet you're terrifying. And it's a textbook case of creating hypervigilance, which is like my mind is beginning to monitor. My mind is going to monitor all things around me to figure out which things lead to a case where mother or father become dysregulated. And then that net basically expands as my brain grows. That net expands greater and greater and greater until I'm basically monitoring the smallest bits of detail in every room, in every social interaction, everything else. And then my brain is basically spending all of its caloric energy, all of its metabolic allotment towards monitoring and hypervigilance. And that means I don't have time spent for just being, playing, being creative, existing, right? I don't get to be a child anymore because I need to monitor all this stuff for survival. And that will lead to the phrase parentification sometimes. Sometimes parentification is that like the parent treats the child, the child needs to treat the parent as if they are the parent. Like the child basically says, I need to caretake your emotional well-being, and I need to subvert or, suppress. I need to suppress my own emotional well-being in favor of monitoring yours, because that's the rules of the game. That's the dire consequences. If I focus on myself, there will be dire consequences. I'll be terrifying. I'll be separated, beaten, whatever. But if I monitor yours, then I can avoid all that, right? This causes a developmental change in the brain where more and more blood flow goes to the portions of the brain that monitor cause and effect relationships, predictive modeling, et cetera, right? So all this blood flow goes to the portions of the brain that monitor that stuff. And because the blood flow and the neurological wiring is getting all this focus, that part of the brain develops faster than another child at the same age, same developmental stage, that is in a safe environment, Because in the safe environment, they get a chance to basically exist, be safe, be creative, play, explore, not worry about shit, right? That's the other guy. But this guy, I don't have that sense of safety. And so my brain needs to monitor all this stuff. And so basically that portion of the brain, it matures faster. And the other part of the playful side of the brain matures slower, or not at all. That's the theory anyway. Makes sense. Checks out with my lived experience and people around me. So now we have this child brain that's literally being modeled anger and violence as a primary adaptive strategy for any case of emotional dysregulation. We have lots of cases of emotional dysregulation also being modeled. So the little child brain is saying, oh, that's a place that is an appropriate response for that kind of situation is for me to be dysregulated and to get angry. You literally just taught it to me. And because I don't have anybody else teaching, I only have you two or one, I don't have any other perspective. And so my brain just absorbs it with no intellectual antibodies, no resistance, no perspective. It just goes straight in. It's like, oh, this is what being alive is. This is what being an adult is. This is what being a human is. This is the correct way to be. So that's the childhood I grew up in. And then guess what? It leads directly to me being late teens and throughout my 20s, really, where there is this massive anger management problem. So eventually I go see a therapist or whatever. And I don't even remember what it was. I think it was started off as a medical doctor, and then they referred me to somebody. And they're just like, oh yeah, and this is right when anger management, that term was starting to become mainstream. We'd start seeing it on sitcoms, on television, that kind of stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, you've got an anger management problem. I'm like, oh, I've got this disease. I've got this affliction, right? Why? Why is this happening? Never heard of attachment theory yet. Apparently, no one else had in the entire medical community in that big city. And so they're just like, oh, well, guess what? Take this drug. I refused. I was just like, there's got to be other ways. I can practice better self-control. I can do this. I can be more monitoring what leads to the bouts of anger, that kind of stuff, right? Which is, guess what? Hypervigilance. So now my hypervigilance, instead of monitoring the entire situation around me to monitor my parents' emotional state, I'm now monitoring the entire environment around me to prevent and modify and manage my own emotional state. Now, at this point, I still had no concept of the inner child or the seat of emotions. It was just a part of me, which I later named the gremlin, because I was like, oh, there's this thing that lives inside me that when it gets activated or triggered or it decides to come out, it's just going to come out with this hatred and vitriol and anger and judgment and everything else. And it's just going to ruin my life, right? It'll like destroy friendships. It's going to break stuff. You know, no laundry hamper is safe. no chair is safe. And it's just going to ruin my life. And then when he goes back to sleep, I will wake up and then my life will be like this smoldering ruins around me. And then I will hate myself and I will feel powerless and confused and shame and guilty, right? I also, at this point in time, I had no concept of the two minds. And that's what we're talking about here. Two minds, inner child, attachment dynamics, suddenly explains everything. So this video and why many people clicked on it is probably because it says anger management. How am I going to help you with your anger management problems? And this is how we do it. How we deal with our anger management problems is, like I often say, we have to pull away from the situation because that situation is just triggering stuff that's already there. So we have to pull away from that situation where we're not actually triggered. We're actually in a place of relative calm. Safety is ideal. And then we have to go inward and say, what is this thing that's going on here? Okay, so now we'll add some additional information about what's going on there. At some point in time, I come across some book, teacher, whatever, and then it ended up being many, but they suggest this idea that anger is what they call a secondary emotion. A secondary emotion is basically the emotion that comes to the surface in order to hide other emotions that are under the surface. What? Why? Well, the idea there is because it has to do with strategies for survival and action. And so the theory here is that anger is a cover story for fear and sadness. Kind of like take fear of a situation and sadness about a situation and kind of mix them all up, and you kind of get this multicolored Play-Doh, and then that gets anger kind of smashed on top of it, and then that's what is delivered into our mind. So now I've got this thing, this motive, this emotional upwelling that comes inside me that is full of energy and just hot and destabilizing. Like, we're definitely dysregulating as this is happening. And then if I'm in the world where I believe that anger is a primary emotion, that it's just anger and that's what anger is, and I'm angry about something, and then I've got limited options because I'm just like, well, anger came up. I just need to figure out a way to prevent the triggering stimulus that will cause an anger reaction inside me. But if we look at it through the lens of this anger as a secondary emotion, we can say, wait a second, this is a cover story. This is an illusion. There's a reason, there's something under the surface. And instead of saying, when I first learned that, I would ask the question, okay, I'm feeling a lot of anger. What am I, like, am I feeling fear or sadness right now? That's how it would be. And that ask that question to other people too. And it's like, oh, do you think you're afraid of something right now? Do you think you're sad about something? Invariably, the answer will be no. I'm just angry. I'm furious. Okay. But if we change the shape of that question into say, what are you sad about right now? Let's just start with the assumption that you are sad about something. What is it? That will oftentimes evoke a response. Most of the time, in my experience. Instead of saying, are you sad about something? You say, you are sad about something. Let's figure out what it is. And then people sit there and they'll think and they'll kind of explore their emotional state. And it's like, man, I really don't like that whatever, right? That when I go to work in the morning, I have to deal with all these people that want my attention, and I'm just feeling tired and spent, and like the day hasn't even begun yet. I just kind of feel this hopeless energy about like how I spend my days. Ooh, that's really interesting. So now you show up at work and you're angry and you're snippy and no one wants to talk to you. And now you come to me asking about help in this, and we say, what is it that you're sad about? And we find out that you kind of have this general overall dissatisfaction with your work environment and how you're spending your time, and that it feels like your life is kind of empty. It's like, that's a lot more useful than just being angry. So, well, there's maybe a fear component to this. What's the fear component? You're definitely afraid of something. What is it you're afraid of? And you'll get people that say, no, I'm not afraid. Like, okay, you can believe that if you want. Good luck with that. But play the game for a little while. Start from the assumption that I am afraid of something. What is it? What is it I'm afraid of? I'm here, I'm at work, I got to deal with all these people. I'm sad about that. It's like, God, you know what? I'm really kind of afraid that this is just all that there is. That this is my life. Every day, 2 or 3 hours at night, watching Netflix and doing random crap. And then I just got to go to sleep and I got to get up and do it all over again. And this whole lifestyle feels empty and monotonous and boring. I don't feel powerful. I don't feel excited about anything. And I'm terrified that that's all that there's left of my life. Perfect. We just explained your anger. We just explained where that anger is coming from. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. And that model has been super, super helpful. Like one of the top most helpful things that has come into my field of awareness, and especially as I'm working with others and trying to help them sort stuff out. But there comes a point, I'm never satisfied with explanations that don't go all the way. And I'm just like, but why? Why is it that Why not just give you fear? Why not just give you sadness? Why not just give you both, right? You walk into work, you hate the monotony of your life, you're sad about that, and you're terrified it's going to last forever. Why doesn't your nervous system just give you those emotions instead of this weird amalgamation that we're calling anger? And so I stewed on that question for a long time. And I came up with an answer that I like, and I've been operating as if it's the best option. No one's given me a better option yet. And this is how this works. When I observe someone who is sinking into the emotion of sadness, what do we see? What do I see? I'm observing myself. I'm observing others. If sadness is their prevalent emotion, their general behavioral profile is to shrink, to retreat, to kind of like downregulate, to move, to take less and less actions. You know, maybe they're crying, maybe they're going through grieving, that kind of stuff. But if they're just a general sense of sadness across a large domain of life, they generally just sink into inaction. This is the kind of thing where they're just like, they'll just sit and veg out on Netflix, which of course is a numbing agent, right? They will lose motivation. They will not be driven, right? These are kind of the behavior profiles that we see around someone who's really sitting in a place of strong sadness. Okay, now let's look at people that have a strong fear response. And if fear is their dominant emotion at that time, what happens? They retract, they pull away, they have a tendency to isolate, they will push away anything that is emotionally difficult or stressful, because they're kind of in this place where it's like, I don't have time or energy to deal with that. And so they'll push away from people, they'll push away from situations, they will push away from uncertainty, they will grab onto certainty, and then they will try to basically isolate until they have a sense of felt safety. Not all, of course, but that's a general profile of someone that's in a very strong fear response. Okay, so if my nervous system gave me sadness and fear when I walked into work, I would have this tendency to isolate. I would have the tendency to retract, to pull away, to go into inaction. I would not have any energy or motive to change the situation. Do you see where I'm going here? If we take fear and sadness, if the nervous system takes fear and sadness and says, yeah, this is really what's going on, but if I actually activate either one of these in a strong way, then we're actually going to shrink away from action. We're going to shrink away from any change. We're just going to basically marinate in our own misery, and we're not actually going to do anything meaningful. We're not going to invoke meaningful change. So instead of that, we're going to put that on the side and we're kind of just cover that over. I'm going to manufacture this new emotion that I'm going to call anger, or that the guy upstairs calls anger, and then I'm going to put that in your lap. And now you've got this surge of adrenaline, you've got this surge of energy, you've got this surge of motivation, even though it's destabilized, dysregulated energy, right? In fact, that's on purpose. Because if I let your calm, rational, regulated brain control this situation, you will inhibit yourself. You will not break that window. You will not shout obscenities at your boss, right? Whatever. If I allow your controlling mind, regulated controlling mind, to manage the situation, we're just going to keep being in the same damn place. And so what your subconscious nervous system does is it manufactures anger with this great big payload of emotional charge and dysregulating energy, and it drops that in your brain, and all the stress hormones shut off the prefrontal cortex and the higher thinking centers, and you devolve more and more towards kind of this animalistic reactive state. Why? So that you will invoke meaningful change. And that's what happens. Someone who is raging out and they are allowed to lash, and I'm not saying we should do this, I'm just saying look at what happens. If you allow someone who's in a highly dysregulated, angry state to just act as their instincts or motivations or whatever, they will do stuff. They will do. They will do in big ways. They will change. They will break things. They will break relationships. They will, you know, take all of this is somewhere on the span of emotionally violent to physical violence, right? I don't like any of that. So I'm not a proponent of this. I'm saying look at what the motivations are. And the way I see it, the motivations coming from the subconscious are you have failed to bring meaningful change to this environment for all this time. And I'm fed up with it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this great big anger ball, and I'm going to drop it in your lap. And when that anger ball pops, it's going to take over your mind. It's going to shut down your higher thinking centers, and it's going to turn you into this raging meat robot. And then maybe you will do something that will bring change to this situation. And then we can be happy. Because the fear is, no, the sadness is that this situation is one that I don't like. And I'm sad that it exists now. And I'm sad and afraid that it will keep existing in the future. And your little 5-year-old that lives inside is asking you to bring some kind of meaningful change to that situation. Change it. Do something. Take drastic action. And if you don't, I'm going to keep making a bigger and bigger anger ball to just flood your brain. And I'm going to hit that hijack button harder and harder until you shut down. And then we act like a raving lunatic and we just lash out and change stuff. Now, usually when we are in highly dysregulated raving lunatic, we lash out, changes get made, but they're not really in alignment with our higher values or really my most authentic self probably. And so when I kind of come out of that anger fugue, I'm sitting here around me and my life is in smoldering ruins, and then I go drop into a shame spiral. So you can see how this strategy is really not effective. It's just, yeah, it gets change done, but it's not really change in a way that's really going to help us move forward in life, because we are no longer a singular, solitary animal that lives on the plains of the Serengeti, right? When we were single, solitary, we didn't have language, we didn't have packs, we didn't have tribes, which was probably never for us, but still the evolutionary mindset kind of says that that's back there a ways. When we were a singular animal, like a tiger or whatever, acting in anger changes the environment. And then when the environment gets adequately changed, something happens. And some percentage of the time, it works in my favor, and now I'm more satisfied with life. I know this is kind of weird and abstract, but seriously, this model has been super helpful. And so if we take this model and we say, well, then what do we do about it? How do I manage my anger? The answer becomes clear. It's like, I need to invoke meaningful change. I need to do it quickly, and I need to do it systemically. It's not like, oh, I'm going to, move from this cubicle to that cubicle so I'm a little bit closer to the window, and then maybe John's anger will go away. No, it's like the real root of the problem is that you feel listless and empty in your life, and your conscious mind that is future thinking and rational, that kind of stuff, is sitting here forcing your entire body and nervous system into a state of slavery, where you basically become, a wage slave, as they call it, or a corporate man, or whatever the hell, whatever it is. Your conscious mind has basically gripped the entire system and forced it into this repetitive, listless, empty life that your deepest nervous system and inner child is profoundly unhappy with. And so what happens? You will be angry over and over and over again. And the trigger points will be the random stuff. It'll be the driver on the road. It'll be the price tag at the grocery store. It'll be a line being too long. It'll be like my computer mouse not working. It'll be some sound coming out of some car that some punk kid is driving by, whatever, right? And a person that's in that state because so many people pair off when they're not really ready for it. A person's going to be in that state and they're going to be in this family environment and they're one of the adults. Could be one of the kids too, but so now you've got this adult that's raging out because they're not happy about their life or whatever, right? That's just one example. There's many. But there's some aspect of their life where they feel chronically afraid and chronically sad about. And because they have not invoked meaningful change, they have kept themselves enslaved to the lifestyle that their conscious mind has chosen. They will be in a state where anger is very close to the surface often. Because there's this other bit of this that's really interesting also, is that since kind of adopting this model, this viewpoint of at how this works, I'm observing people that are going through just where I am physically, the town I live in, the work I do, the classes I teach, da 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 da. I work with a lot of people that are in a lot of different emotional states. We'll just put it that way. And so I observe someone that's going through major bouts of emotional movement, in a negative emotions. And then you can see it. It's just clear as a bell. It's like when their deeper inner system believes that there's no hope of change, usually because they are imprisoned by a parent or a cultural system or religious ideology or whatever. They don't like what's there, but they don't actually believe that any change is possible. You don't see anger. Anger is not the emotion that arises. What you see is hopelessness. And that was a revelation. I'm like, woo. Like, this person is showing behavioral cues that we would oftentimes associate with depression or hopelessness. But it's like when we dig in and we're kind of exploring around what's going on and what their motives and what they're afraid of and all that kind of stuff, realize that there's this major part of their life that they hate. They detest it, but they feel like it can't be changed. There's no hope of change. And I'm profoundly sad that I'm stuck in this situation. I am terrified that I'll be stuck in this situation forever. Their nervous system will be a wreck because they're in a constant state of dysregulation and anxiety. And what you see is hopelessness. And that hopelessness is oftentimes paired with very strong anxious behavior patterns. But you talk to someone else who's actually got anger management problems, and then you dig in around in there and you find this profound fear and sadness and aspects of their life that they hate, or aspects of their parents, oftentimes, that they hate and they detest it and they're sad about it and they're furious. You're like, well, how come you're furious and the other person's hopeless? And you dig around in there and then you find that this person's being like, oh, like they believe it can be different if they can just find the way, right? It's like, I am furious about this and I keep trying and I've done all this, paid for all these workshops and done all this healing work and I've tried to have these conversations and I paid for therapy and blah, 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 blah. But you can tell that there's still this nugget inside there that believes that change is possible. If I can just figure out the right thing to say, the right thing to do, the right technique to approach, whatever, I can make this be different. And because they believe it can be different, the predominant response that we see is anger, frustration, rage, vitriol, hatred, right? Interesting. And now what's happening in my brain right now is that I'm leaping over to these discussion groups, thousands upon thousands of people in these discussion groups on the internet. The one I'm thinking of right now is basically complaining about avoidance, but there's others, right? Where the main theme inside of the posts that are happening in these discussion groups is anger, frustration, vitriol, like disgust, like this furious element to that's behind their words. I mean, sometimes it's right there in the words, but oftentimes it's under the words, right? And they might be posting some meme about, oh, this attachment style does that, or this types of people are always a narcissist or whatever. There's this like dissatisfaction, this frustration, this anger to it. And it's just like, why? And it's like, because deep down inside that person, they believe that that guy that they dated, that they're classifying as an avoidant or narcissist or anxious or BPD or whatever, they believe that person could be different, and that they believe that that person chooses to be that way. And honestly, you can just look in the comments in this channel right here under the videos that have anything to do with anxious or avoidance, and you will see comments from people that where the general theme of behind the words is that like they're evil, nasty, why would you do this? They're disgusting because they could be different. Why would they do the things that they do knowing that it's going to hurt someone? They're obviously choosing to do that, right? So what do? You get anger. But then now move to a different person that is dealing with the same kind of struggle, and they have come to a place of acceptance that the person they're interacting with is simply not capable of showing up the way they want them to. And what do they have? They have a calmness. They have a sadness to them, right? They kind of have this like, it's hopeless, just let it go, right? I'll deal with my grief and I need to move on. They're in a more balanced state. They're more regulated. They're more calm. Their life is not being pushed around like a big meat robot by these surges of anger energy. Interesting, huh? So if someone out there has a better model of what anger is, how to deal with it, how to reprogram it, shape it, whatever, then I'm all ears. I would love to learn. But so far, this is the best one I found. And I hope that this message finds the eyes and ears of the people that it's really going to benefit. Because if you or someone you know has sudden, furious bouts of anger, and especially if they're kind of unpredictable, think about it through this lens. I don't know, maybe share this video with them. I don't know. They may not be ready for it. But you can observe this person through that lens and just be like, ah. And it happens now. Like when I see someone who's really raging out, even myself, I'm just like, oh, that little 5-year-old inside is just really doesn't like this situation and wants it to be different. Is there some way that I can make this situation be very different, very quickly, without any kind of hatred, rage, vitriol? I can just be like, oh, I am driving on a road, and road rage still, it's not road rage, it is irresponsible, unaware drivers, which the place I live is filled with them. And so that's an ongoing challenge for me. And I frequently will get very angry at other drivers. And then I'm like, right, this is just my inner child really not liking the situation because he believes these people are being selfish or dangerous or blah, 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 or whatever. And he really wants to be different. Well, I don't actually have power in that situation. I can't change other people, but what I can do is I can change my behavior. So I can change the times of day that I drive. I can change the destinations. I can opt out of events that require that I drive through very crowded places at very crowded times, right? I can choose a different route that goes through more rural country roads instead of through major traffic pathways. It might take me an extra hour to get there, but wow, I get to see nature, I get to enjoy music, and I get to not be angry, right? That's me practicing anger management. Get it? Hope so. Wish you guys the best. I believe in you. You can do it. Peace.